At this Catholic elementary school in Phoenix, Arizona, 11 children contracted childhood leukemia, and 9 of those children died. And in Guilford, Connecticut, 5 brain tumors on a street with only 9 homes. 2 towns, 2 cancer clusters, 2 mysteries. The investigation into these 2 neighborhoods answered some questions, but raised many more. Arizona has always been known for its warm, dry climate and clean desert air. What was once primarily desert and farmland has gradually been transformed. As the population moved west, so did development and industry, and along with it, new environmental problems.
Do we have a problem? Do I need to be concerned? If not, then I'll leave right now. Are you saying no? In all honesty, not to protect your credentials, please.
This public meeting was to voice concerns and get some answers about the unusually high number of childhood leukemia cases in the Phoenix suburb of Maryvale. Between 1961 and 1985, 11 children attending St. Vincent de Paul's Catholic Elementary School developed acute lymphocytic leukemia. 9 of those children died.
Almost every grade had 2 classrooms. And it was a school that had a waiting list to get into. Half the school shut down now. People don't want to send their kids there anymore.
Even more alarming, in the neighborhood surrounding the school, there were 49 cases of childhood leukemia, 2.5 times higher than normal. Ramona Barrett lived in Maryvale when her youngest daughter Jessica developed leukemia and died.
I thought it was maybe something I did while I was pregnant. And I would just rack my brain to think, what happened? What did I do? And I couldn't think of anything that I had done different than with my other 2 children. And, you know, I still don't know. And, I mean, it's always going to bother me the rest of my life.
Sandy Matthews thinks back, too, and remembers her son, Josh, and the 2-year battle he waged against leukemia, but lost.
To sit and hold my child after a radiation treatment when, you know, he's just dry heaving and throwing up and you can feel his pain and there's nothing you can do, you know, take that away. And that's what leukemia came to mean to us, is, you know, watching a loss of life from somebody that was so alive.
The Arizona State Health Department was alarmed. Norm Peterson headed the investigation.
You try to find something that these people have in common. You would like to know, for instance, if all of their parents worked in the same factory, or if all of their mothers had had x-rays while they had been pregnant.
One of the first things investigators tried to discover, is this a true cancer cluster or a random occurrence? If the average rate of cancer in a city is 1 in every 10 households, for example, we assume that the distribution of those cancers will be more or less equal. But if it isn't, and the same number of cancer cases happen in a group or cluster, scientists try to figure out if it's because of chance or if there's a reason for the cluster. The rate of childhood leukemia in Maryvale was higher than it should have been, and the residents first suspected pollution.
We know there's a problem. There are studies that show benzene does cause childhood leukemia. Benzene comes from gasoline. Here's the kids, here's the area where children have been dying of leukemia. Here's the gas storage facility right here. Do you think it's just coincidence?
The tank farm near the cluster site was suspected of leaking benzene into the atmosphere. Benzene has been linked to leukemia, but not to the type found in the Maryvale cancer cluster.
Cancer is cancer, whether it's leukemia, whether it's cancer of the brain, cancer of the skin, cancer of the stomach, cancer of the lungs. Cancer is cancer.
But researchers say that isn't entirely correct. There are many different kinds of cancer with many different causes. For cancer to develop, 2 things must happen. First, a cell becomes damaged in some way by an inherited defect, or by something like radiation, a virus, or a chemical. Then something has to activate the cell, like the chemicals in cigarette smoke or pollution. The result? Cells which multiply out of control, creating junk piles of abnormal cells called tumors.
For reasons that we don't completely understand, childhood leukemias tend to cluster. And there have been many leukemia clusters in children described in the literature.
But what causes a large number of leukemia cases to cluster in a small neighborhood such as Maryvale? Norm Peterson sent detailed questionnaires to the families of the cancer victims and immediately tested the St. Vincent de Paul School.
We immediately went out, did a radiation survey to see that there hadn't been, for instance, some radioactive material incorporated into the structure.
They also tested radiation levels in the schoolyard and surrounding neighborhoods to see if electric power lines or a substation might have been involved. Since much of Maryvale had been farmland back in the 60s and routinely sprayed with insecticides, could this have affected the drinking water? Some residents remembered contaminated wells closed by the city a few years earlier.
The block I grew up on was right smack in the middle of it. Looking back, it's very scary, to think that we lived with this and, why.
The citizens of Maryvale wanted answers. Their home values were tumbling, their children dying. What was causing the high rates of childhood leukemia at this Catholic elementary school in Arizona and in the surrounding neighborhood? It was a cancer cluster which took the lives of 32 children and hospitalized 17 others.
You wanted to run away, but then you wanted to move, sell out, let's go away, let's go somewhere else. But you have children who have lives, you have jobs, you have a home. You just cannot walk away from everything.
This absolute, what I would consider destruction of faith, even with the church. Your children are in a Catholic school. You're a practicing Catholic, you think, wow, well, if nothing else, Bishop O'Brien will stand there and say, well, maybe we better do something. Everywhere we turned, we ran into the same stone wall.
It was a rate of cancer more than twice what it should have been, and the residents wanted to know what the state medical detectives were doing about it.
My children go to St. Vincent de Paul. It was focused there. Are my children safe to play there, to drink the water? How long is it going to take? I mean, we're scared, especially since we've been there.
When state epidemiologists reviewed the test results of St. Vincent de Paul School, they learned some shocking information. The air quality, drinking water, levels of pesticides and radiation were all within state and federal safety levels. And they noticed something else. These levels were below those found in other schools and in other neighborhoods. The nearby wells, which had been contaminated, were closed years earlier and weren't used for drinking water. The drinking water from Maryvale was tested and found to be safe. Next, Peterson and his staff investigated the local industries.
We looked at industries from two aspects. We looked at sources of air pollution, and we basically went in and did an inventory of what they were releasing.
But they could identify no toxins in amounts that could be linked with the excess cancers. Peterson was concerned that he might never find the cause of the cancer cluster. Cancer doesn't leave a fingerprint or clue of any kind as to what caused it. And unlike other illnesses, leukemia patients like Josh Phillips produce no antibodies to the cancer-causing agent.
When you get into childhood leukemia, there are no nice, neat little antibodies to anything. There is nothing that says that leukemia is caused by radiation as opposed to being caused by benzene, as opposed to being caused by electromagnetic fields.
So this becomes a much more difficult problem, and sort of the Achilles heel of environmental epidemiology really is trying to determine what somebody's exposure was many, many years ago.